DJ, thanks for coming by. You had an unbelievable demo on stage. I wonder if you can just give us that high-level recap of what we saw.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. It's been a day of sorts. It's been a fantastic day. So yeah, what you saw in the demo was really, starting off with how a lot of the IT folks are thinking about, hey, listen, I want to know how my employees are using AI inside of my organization, and to be able to help them with that. What we have done is we've made it incredibly simple for you to be able to access exactly all of the applications that your employees are using by a simple click. You click into user access, and that takes you into this view that gets all of these applications categorized in a nice way. All the way from calling it conversational chat to video editing tools to audio editing, so on and so forth. We create those categories, and inside of each one of those categories, we list the applications that are most commonly used by your employees. Now, when you further click into more details, what happens is you now have the opportunity to dive deeper into each one of those applications, see which ones are sanctioned and unsanctioned, and then you also get to understand exactly how your users are using those applications. That allows you to put the right types of guardrails so that people are not accidentally sharing confidential information outside. They're not trying to use any kind of prompt injection techniques to be able to compromise that application. Gives you as a security practitioner and an IT practitioner a peace of mind that people are using the third-party apps, AI applications that you're enabling for them in a safe and secure manner.
Transparency is such a big part of this. I think even the ability to create guardrails, you can't do it unless you know what's happening. And so
That's right.
Do you see other benefits other than the creation of guardrails that comes out of that transparency layer?
No, absolutely. First of all, from a productivity perspective, you realize and recognize what are the applications that your employees are going to by default. Mm-hmm. And you want to make sure that those things are highly available. As an IT professional, you want to make sure that those are the ones that you're negotiating the best contracts for. There's a ton of downstream effects that happen because of that. The second part of it is also, it gives you the ability to sort of, provide your employees with an amazing experience. A lot of times IT and security is seen as things that slow people down. This allows you to flip that and say, hey, listen, we want to turn on a new AI tool for you. Because if you go back to my conversations with customers almost about 12 months ago, the initial reaction was like, hey, listen, you know what? We're just going to block all things AI.
Oh, you're stabbing my heart. Okay.
That's literally how the response is, because we don't have the tools or the controls.
Yeah.
We don't have the right leverage to be able to do that as a security professional. And so what they did was just block things out. And the funniest part though was some of these smaller customers, some of the smaller ones that didn't have this huge teams, they said, listen, we just printed out a statement that's a policy that says, do not use generative AI apps, and we stuck it, and that was it. That's the best that we could do. So I think you see that graduation from people that hope that the policy kind of just applies if they put it in a handbook, which really never works. And then you have folks that just completely block things out, and that never works either. So what really matters is when you start providing that visibility, you understand how they're using it, and then you start enabling them. That is the most successful path. We've seen this, by the way. This movie has played out once before. When you think about the whole shadow IT problem that has happened before, this is just a replay of that, right?
Yeah.
And so we know better, and that's why we said, listen, we've seen this movie play out. We're going to get ahead of it. We're going to build something that allows these security teams. It gives them visibility, gives them the enforcement capabilities, and let's allow them to move faster.
What I love about this is that there are some enterprise leaders that are fearful for a varied set of reasons, kind of long tail reasons, right? They don't know how to use it. They don't know. The bulk of the reasons that they were turning away was security. And so it just feels like kind of security is the big word for 2025 for getting these systems into production. How are you guys thinking about the vision of security for AI?
I think you're spot on about this, right? I think this is going to be the big unlock, because if you think about what's really happening, one of the key topics that's being talked about a lot is that we're running out of public data. So that's to be able to build these foundation models, you can only you can scrape so much of the web that's useful to be able to build these models. But what's not yet unlocked is really the use of enterprise data. And a lot of these enterprises are generating petabytes of data almost every single day, right? And that's really where the next set of huge amount of innovation is going to happen in 2025. But to be able to unlock that data, security and safety is like a huge part of it. You want to make sure that that enterprise data can be safely handled. And so So you're spot on. It's going to be a big watchword for how the adoption of AI, and more importantly, the value extraction of AI inside of the enterprise is going to be realized. Now, the thing that's really interesting from a security perspective is that you have to start out by saying, hey, listen, we're going to provide you with visibility, right? We got to be where employees are using them, but also we talked about third-party applications. That a lot of companies will start building first-party applications. Like, hey, I'm going to build this application to be able to offer an AI assistant for my...
Especially as they get their practice runs in.
Exactly, right? So they start to feel a little more comfortable, and a little more confident. They feel like, hey, listen, I now can start moving things into production. And I think that that's going to happen in a big way. And when security unlocks that part of it, what's going to happen is people are going to be like, hey, listen, visibility is great, but I want to make sure that these models are behaving the right way. And it doesn't have to be models that they build. It could be models that they download from the internet. They could, they could go grab a Llama model or a Mistral model and then say, hey, listen, I'm going to use this to be able to solve a customer support use case. Or I'm going to use this to solve maybe a simple use case where I have to summarize a whole bunch of things for my analysts to be able to look at things. Whatever the use case is, we want to make sure that these models are fit for purpose. So it's going to become incredibly important to validate those models, and then finally move things into production, and at runtime be able to say, hey, listen, somebody's trying to attack the model. There's a denial of service attack. There's a prompt injection attack. There's a jailbreak that's happening. Being able to do all of that stuff gives them the peace of mind at the end of the day that, listen, we are now in a good place to move these applications out into production and then start building on top of that. So I think that to me is personally very exciting, what's about to happen in 25.
I want to talk about the runtime piece, and also just calling out, this tool is trying to help in a big way, right? It's not just visibility. What I'm also hearing is it's going to help you on some things like documentation. It's going to help you on things like upskilling plans. It's going to help you on things like procurement plans and figuring out, maybe you don't even use 5 of the tools, right? Yeah. Just knowing that and saying, now you can maybe close those contracts.
Exactly.
On the runtime piece, real-time AI is what I am hearing a lot, really in the last couple of weeks. Like, we are starting to see that lift. And so I want to dig in. Why is real-time AI so important, especially for security?
I think this is also harking back to what Jensen just talked about at the CES. One of the big things that's starting to happen is people are recognizing that it's not just about the model size anymore. You might have models that are larger and larger, but then you start to see diminishing returns. So what's essentially starting to happen in the market is you're starting to see test time inference. That's what they're calling it, where they're saying, hey, listen, at runtime, I want to be able to quickly see exactly what the question is and be able to potentially increase my compute to get a better response back, right? When you start to see that happen, what that means from a security perspective is like, you're going to see each one of these, arbitrary questions are going to cause increase in compute, which means you really want to make sure that the questions that you're asking are intentional and they solve a meaningful pain point. So if you go back to the days of the web, what really happened was, one of the ways people recognized that you could block a web server from doing something was by sending it a lot of requests. And when you suddenly see a lot of requests coming in, the server shuts down because it's not able to process enough of them because it's got enough backlog. And that creates what's called a denial of service attack. So a lot of people think like, oh my God, the server's down. It's just an attack, And so you could have something very similar happen in the model world, but guess what? It's going to cost you a lot more dollars, especially if you're doing test time compute and inference. So when you start thinking about like what the test time is going to evolve into from a runtime perspective, a lot of things that are that we took for granted and sort of like the way we assumed AI would work in an asynchronous manner changes, right? And so security becomes a tremendous importance. Like, you really want to filter out things that are potential attacks. You want to get your real users, not bots, engaging with them. And there may be legitimate bots. There may be legitimate agents that are trying to like reach back into the model. But knowing how you would solve for that, having the right type of identity tokens, recognizing that these are acceptable use, automatically having a protocol to be able to do that. There's a ton of things that's about to happen, and we're in the midst of it. We're working with standards organizations like NIST, like MITRE. We're also, another part of Cisco is called Cisco Outshift, and they're leading the charter in terms of defining how the agentic world will fundamentally interact with each other and change the standards in the of how we think about these things. So, short version, I know it was a long version. Short version.
I loved it.
There's going to be a ton of things that happen, and I'm super bullish about it.
Even just on the end, like new evals as well. I think one thing that you keyed up that was so sharp was this weird dichotomy of we actually have to allow and validate not just human users, but also agentic users that we want, that are actually doing business with our pages. One piece that I wanted to click into, I think a lot of the test time compute systems that we're seeing today, maybe they're thinking for 3 minutes.
Yep.
Presumably, we will be seeing systems in 2025 that are thinking for hours or maybe even across multiple days. And so are you guys seeing that the length of test time compute also exponentially increases, linearly increases, threats? Like, give us a sense of combination of length and threat.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great question, right? I think today, it's still early days of like how we're starting to leverage additional amount of compute to be able to like come back with certain responses that are deeply thought through. Those use cases start to become, I'll give you an example in a security basis. When you think about what we're doing with extended detection and response, or XDR, a lot of times you have to correlate data from like a whole lot of different pieces of information that you got to get from different data sources, and then say, hey, you know what? I'm seeing this at the endpoint. I'm seeing this at the network. I'm seeing this at the email, and then being able to correlate that to say, listen, I've looked at enough amount of that data to say this is definitely an attack, or this is definitely not an attack. That requires a good amount of dynamically adapting computational resource, right? But I do think that there's a point of diminishing return where no amount of compute can potentially solve a particular part of the problem if you don't have the right type of data to be able to get you the right response back. So I think similarly, what I imagine is going to happen is like if your model has never ever, from a reasoning perspective, it needs to go deep enough to be able to say, hey, listen, I have seen something of this sort for me to be able to come to you with an answer. Then yes, I think then you're going to see that potential non-linearity in the time scale. But if it's going to be something where you don't have anything, the model's not going to converge at all for the response that's meaningful. So I think there's a balance in like finding out like what type of what is your timeout? Like at what point do you say, listen, the model's not going to come back with an answer? It really harks back to the hitchhiker's story of like everybody's waiting for an answer, and it takes like years and years and years, and then you get the answer 42. Nobody remembers what the question was, But,
spoiler alert.
Yeah.
DJ.
Sorry.
Well, I would also love to ask, just as you're thinking about your new offering, AI Defense, what use cases did you guys have in mind as you're maybe talking to early users, when you're about to release? What are some of the first use cases that people are just going to jump on?
Yeah, I think almost all of them talk about this as like, visibility is their number one use case. They're like, hey, listen, we want to be able to understand what's really going on inside of our environments. Because without knowing what it is, I don't know what my next step would potentially look like. They're trying to make this work with like a bunch of different tools, but they're not purpose-built for discovering AI applications, whether it is a third-party or the first-party tools. The second thing that they say is, listen, validating a model to make sure that the model has no vulnerabilities is a huge ask, because there isn't any CVE databases that exist for common vulnerability and exploits databases for models. It exists for applications. You know that if Java is compromised, the CVE database shows up and you know how to go fix it. But in a model, you have no such thing. So which means you really have to start getting into that discipline of saying, hey, listen, I'm going to validate the model each time I change, because guess what? If you fine-tune a model, you might break a guardrail off. So that's really what is the second most important thing. The third thing that they come back with is saying, hey, listen, I want to be able to enforce this wherever I would like to, because a lot of folks are starting to already think about, hey, listen, we're going to have humanoids, doing something on the shop floor, either picking up things or welding things and so on and so forth. And these things have LLMs to be able to for allowing a human-machine interface that comes in and says, hey, stop doing this or start doing this. And hey, can you please hold this for a second? Which I saw, by the way, was very cool. It was a live example where some workers walking around with a big box of heavy things, and they say, hey, can you hold this for a second? And the robot just says, yeah, sure, and then holds it, and then gives it back.
The robot said, yeah, sure?
Yeah, because it's got an LLM inside of it, right? So it's basically just responding. It's probably just an API call to OpenAI. And
sure,
back.
I just love the verbal confirmation of it. Okay.
It's holding it and it confirms. It's a very human-like interaction.
Yeah.
And so when you start thinking about those types of modalities that start to become very common, I mean, Unitree sold over, about 100,000 robots in less than 3 months. And so that tells you that the enforcement point of where you enforce these things becomes incredibly important, right? And you may not be able to enforce something inside of a robot, but you sure can enforce something on the network that connects to the robot. And so if you have a Wi-Fi access point, which is how the robot's sort of beaming all of these things back and forth, you now have the ability to say, hey, listen, I'm not going to send any more packets to you because something that you're doing is not okay. And you have the ability to also send information to be able to say, hey, stop the robot from falling on grandma. So their test, that's apparently the robotic test. Don't fall on grandma.
Don't fall on okay, so that's the new bumper sticker for
That's
2025.
the new bumper sticker. That's right.
One final question to leave folks with, which is your vision for 2025 and maybe one specific action item that folks watching can take. And maybe it's in a future of workspace, maybe it is in robotics, maybe it is in visibility, whichever part, but just one piece.
I think the biggest thing that I want to talk about, from when I think about 2025 is we really cannot sacrifice safety and security for speed, right? We want a lot of people to move fast and break things, but at the same time we want them to do it safely, because I think AI safety and security is non-negotiable. You have to make sure that you're doing this right as you're building complex systems, because you really don't want to build that tech debt to be able to come back in and say, oops, we forgot to do this, we got to go do all of these things. So I think what I'm most bullish about 2025 is unlocking enterprise data, making this incredibly available and starting to extract value from enterprise applications. I think it's going to be huge. AI is going to, AI and agentic systems that are going to start to become very commonplace. I think it's going to be tremendously exciting. And my vision is, man, we're going to see AI be used, everywhere. I think the point that was being discussed earlier was our habituation is going to be, we're going to get so used to it. Like, OpenAI on our phones is fantastic the day it was released, but the next day I was like, wait, it doesn't do this for me. And I think that's what's going to happen with a lot of AGI stuff that's going to become you recognize that it's doing things for you that's better than anything that you would do yourself. But people are going to get used to it and be like, okay, what's next? So it's going to happen, but I'm super excited about 2025.
I'm excited for the growth and even the settling moments. I'm really excited to see what you guys continue to build. Thanks so much for coming by. Really appreciate it.
It was my pleasure. Thanks for having me.